Hi, you have Chris and Eli here with Landlord Gurus, and today we're going to try something a little bit different. In the past, we've done at least kind of an informal script for our videos before we started talking, and today we decided to do an experiment and kind of embark on something that's more or less what Chris and I would do if we were having coffee or walking our dogs, and something comes up about managing rental property and how we have navigated issues. So this is something that we're going to try out and we may do more of in the future. And today we've decided that we want to talk about some ideas. If one of us was to be upgrading a unit or updating, how would you make choices about doing those updates that would lead to maintenance efficiency, low maintenance costs in the future? So we've both been through this many times. And I have lots of ideas. So Chris, what comes to
Well,
mind?
actually, it's a good question because my wife and we've recently been talking about upgrading our in-law unit that we've got in the basement and renting that out again for long-term rental. And we know it needs some work, so we've been, looking at it and trying to figure out what we would do to make this something that we would rent out.
It's very functional right now, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
it's very functional. It works great. We've been renting it out for short-term rentals for a long time, but it's got a little bit of wear and, like the cabinet doors, a couple of cabinet doors that fell off.
uh, right.
And I tried to rehang them and they're not quite right. And they're just, showing a little bit of wear. The flooring is kind of old vinyl linoleum, I guess. Is that what it is, where you lay it down?
It's probably vinyl,
Yeah.
right? It's a sheet vinyl
Yeah.
in the kitchen and bathroom, but then you've got carpet in,
Carpet down in the main living area.
right.
The vinyl, like where the seam is, and one of the seams, like it's starting to come up, and
Yeah.
so you got a little ridge, and the baseboards are, the same kind of vinyl that lays on the
Oh, you've got that like cove plastic, the vinyl, yeah.
so that that peels back in certain areas. So yeah, we're considering what we do, not massive upgrades, but upgrades. If we were to put it on the market now, what's the best way to go about doing this? What would be good kind of rental apartment? Um,
Well, flooring's the first thing that always comes to mind for me. And having updated a bunch of units, within more like 5 to 10 or even a little bit longer ago, I did a lot of bamboo flooring, engineered flooring. So it's a layer of bamboo, actual wood on plywood. It's great stuff and people like it. And it was relatively cost effective. I was taking out carpet at the time. And so people really liked it a lot more. Since then, and Chris, I'm sure you're aware of this, and this is marketing genius, the LVP, luxury vinyl plank,
right.
and has come onto the scene, and it's a click together flooring product that can look like wood or tile or all kinds of different things. So, I mean, that's my first thought when you talk about that particular update. But have you thought about that, or have you used it at all?
Yeah, I haven't used it. I've seen it a lot when we were renovating our kitchen here several
Mhm.
years ago. I remember when we were looking for tile, I did come across a lot of luxury vinyl plank or luxury vinyl tile, and it looked
Right.
great. I mean, it was, a lot of different patterns,
And
from
it's
the
it's
modern to
impervious
kind
to
of,
water.
yeah, classic patterns, modern patterns. You could kind of get it all, and it was pretty
Mhm.
inexpensive. It seemed like it. I wasn't sure how well it would hold up. You say that it's impervious to water.
Yeah, so versus Pergo, Pergo, which is basically just a picture of, we use usually wood,
Right,
laminate onto a particle board or what they call MDF, modern
right,
density fiberboard. Water, that does not do well with water.
right,
So kitchens and bathrooms, like it does okay. I've had it in those places, but it's definitely not bomb proof. I'd verge on saying that LVP is pretty indestructible. It's about as indestructible as a product you can get, as far as I'm aware. And
right.
we don't get any money from the LVP lobby. Right. Just for the record, we have no stake in this. So
Yeah, like with the Pergo, right? It's with the laminate on top. Theoretically, it's impervious, but then once you have an imperfection, like it starts
it's the joint.
wearing, you get a hole in it or whatever, yeah, then water can get into it or in between the seams or whatever, where they connect, right? And
Yeah.
then like you said, it's MDF, which like those old IKEA cabinets and stuff, right? Like
It swells. You
wells,
get
yeah.
swells, yeah. So having done this a number of times, the trick, and this was true for the bamboo as well as LVP and products like that. The trick is the moldings. So if like you've got that one step, you've got to step down, right, from your upper level where the bathroom and the kitchen are
Right.
to your lower area. So finding a nosing that will trim out that edge because the edge of the planks are not a finish grade. So you want to think about, is there a stair tread? Does the product have a stair tread, or do they have just a nosing that you can apply to it? What are you going to put on the risers, on the face of the stairs? Those are the types of things that both have, you're going to have to figure out to execute it. But also, some products are superior to others in terms of the accessories that they have, essentially. And it's worth it looking at those things.
Yeah. Yeah. But they're pretty easy to install. And
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. I think a decent DIY person it's definitely within the realm of abilities. And you can be careful about how you choose the design so that it's easy to hide your seams, like patterns. You end up having to replicate them because everybody's going to see where the end of one plank is and the next one, if it has a pattern to it. So those are things you want to consider. So
How do you cut it? Is it
just a miter saw,
okay.
just a chop saw. So it cuts. Or probably a good idea to wear a mask. It's plastic.
Yeah.
So the face of it is plastic. So
Cool.
okay. Actually,
Uh,
along those lines, one thing I've done in bathrooms mostly is I've used PVC baseboards and moldings. So instead of what usually is either wood or mostly people are using MDF, which is this really fine, it's not
wood particle, right?
yeah, wood particles, yeah, in glue. Because if you have a bathtub or a shower overflow or the tub trickles down the side, that stuff will swell up as well. Or a toilet overflows.
Mhm.
Then you've got water right up against something that really does not like water.
Yeah.
So PVC is available. Again, it's plastic, but it's available in all kinds of contours, like a traditional wood would be. I use a lot of 2.5-inch high with a little molding, little cove on the top type of profile. It's kind of classic looking, or it's available in just a square, profile. And it's generally paintable. So that's something you want to check. And you want to consider whether or not you want to paint it. Maybe that's something you don't want to do. Maybe you want to glue it in place and not nail it so you don't have any pinholes and not paint it.
And so does it come in different colors then? Like, so you wouldn't have to paint it, or is it just kind of standard
I mean,
white?
it might, not that I'm aware of, it's generally white.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, but I keep colors simple in my, I usually have a white that I use and, a white on white trim, especially a bright white trim against more of a warm white wall.
Right.
It usually works pretty well.
Yeah, and you might want to paint it, if it gets dinged up or whatever,
Yeah.
scuffed up, you might want to come back and repaint it in between tenants for sure.
Most cases it will get painted just because nailing it in places,
Yeah.
pin nailing it in place is usually the easiest thing to do. So that brings up paint. So my approach on paint is if I'm painting baseboards, it's all pretty well always the same color as the wall. And I started out doing semi-gloss on the baseboards and then eggshell on the walls. The nice thing there is if it's the same color, that line doesn't have to be super clean. Your brush mark can come up or
Right.
up onto the wall a little bit or down, you don't see it. So that's a strategy I've used. I often now will just use eggshell in the living spaces, eggshell on the baseboard and the wall.
Use the same paint for everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I make sure to use a good quality paint as well as a nice color, kind of the color of the day. I used a Benjamin Moore OC90 was the number. I knew the code very well because I used gallons and gallons and gallons of it. But it was a little warmer. They call it vanilla ice cream was the name of it. And now I've just started using a little bit more white because that's what's in vogue right now. That's what people want to see. So
you could just use OC90 for a different apartment unit.
I've got a lot of buckets in OC90 around of different ages, but there's been a lot of efficiency used as well. So,
what about what do you use for? Well, I guess sticking with paint, I guess if you use eggshell in the main living areas, I guess you use something like a semi-gloss or something in the bathrooms.
I do, yeah. And walls and ceilings are always the same sheet.
Yeah, yeah, okay. And the semi-gloss for bathrooms for wet areas, just it holds up better when the walls get wet. Yeah.
And it's good for windowsills too. So if somebody puts a glass that has a little bit of condensation on a windowsill, it does better. Baseboards are less of an issue, but I do think that semi-gloss is a good way to go for trim in general, and especially anything that's horizontal that someone might put
Yeah.
some.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was also thinking about countertops. What do you like for countertops in a rental?
Yeah, that's a good one. In our market here in Seattle, where it's an expensive market, and there are also a lot of new units coming on the market, I've actually upgraded. I guess I've done kind of three over the last couple of years where I've gone to a quartz, a solid surface. Um, it's kind of a faux. Most people know what it is, but a faux stone.
Right.
And I usually use a white or something pretty plain, or maybe it's got a little bit of a marble accent to it and that type of thing. People love it. There are no grout lines. It does well, although it's not entirely bomb-proof in terms of stains or hot pots. But it's what I want to live with. It's what I have in my house, and people now see it out there on the market.
Yeah.
So to be competitive, I've started putting that in.
Yeah, it's what we have in our house as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But it does chip though, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I guess, is that a concern with being a rental? You worry about that?
Well, I'm new enough to it that I've mostly encountered it in my house.
Mhm.
Those little chipping, the pots at the sink
Yep.
is where I've had it happen. They're little, and so far it's not that big an issue. I suspect that it is repairable, but it's also, I think it probably will hold up well enough. We've only got a few little chips over 5 or 7 years we've been living with it. In a rental, it's not quartz. These products used to be really expensive. They're now only pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So maybe you need to replace it in 10 years.
Uh-huh.
And I think it'll look good and do well over that period of time. If you're in a market where people are looking for that and it's a high enough end market that it pays, I think it's not perfect, but I think it's the way to go.
Okay. What about other options? Like, how would you compare it with, granite or another stone? It's cheaper.
Well, that opens the door on a big question in my mind, and is a topic for me in my own home. I've used natural stone for the last time anywhere. Because it doesn't like acids, so they don't like red wine to varying extents, the materials. But even granite and marble, granite's pretty good, but it'll stain. Red wine will stain it. You'd want to watch out for lemon juice and that type of thing. And it's going to be more expensive than quartz. So I just don't see a scenario where it's a good idea pretty well anywhere in a rental, unless it's a custom home, and you're really high end,
right.
and you're kind of in the luxe, that you need that extra fanciness.
Right.
But that's a minority of rental units.
Right. Yeah.
I've had Corian before, which is plastic.
Yeah.
And it's a great material in terms of living with it. It's really nice. It cleans up really nicely, just like all the solid surfaces do. The only real downside with it, I think it is a little less expensive than a quartz would be.
Mm-hmm.
It's the hot pot.
Right. It burns, right?
Right. Yeah. And some people build in little trivets, they'll build in like heat bars where you can fit a pot on them, but that adds a bunch of expense.
And you got to trust that it's being used that way. And, you could, the hot stuff's put where it's supposed to be put. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're not in a market where you can justify one of these solid surfaces, good old Formica, is still a pretty good option. I mean, the majority of my units still have that. And actually one that I built recently, it's expensive, on the face of it, but it's just a plywood with that's faced. So it came essentially with Formica on it already. And that's just a piece of plywood that I set in place on top of the cabinets. And I like the look of the exposed plywood. It's a high quality plywood. It'll wear similarly to a Formica, maybe even a little tougher than that. And it's pretty cost effective because you have to have a carpenter who does a good job at installing it. You probably don't want to undermount your sinks because you don't want to expose that plywood edge to water at the sink. You can put a nosing on it as well. It's an approach that I like. but you can also do the Formicas. This is a pretty modern look that maybe would have been hard to replicate with a Formica. So just another idea.
Yeah. Tile.
Yeah, tile's great stuff, in terms of cost effectiveness. And I think, well, my opinion is colored by my wife's opinion because she's absolutely allergic to tile countertops. And
Allergic meaning she
grout, like no go. Don't
yeah.
does not want grout on a countertop.
Sure.
And I think that the germ stuff is a little bit overplayed. I don't think it's that big a deal. If it's, you can clean it fine, but grout does discolor and stain.
Yeah.
So if you do use tile, I have seen products that are meant for countertops that are full depth, so that you just get, then they say they're 24 deep by 12 wide, so you get a little grout line on either side, but it's really minimized. It's not these little 4x4,
right, where it's all over the place, and
all over the place.
Those are hard to. I mean, I've dealt with that before. They're hard to keep clean.
Yeah,
just, you get crumbs in there, and they do stain and all that. I am not a big fan as well, but
and labor being so expensive these days, the put tiling is it may have lost some of its efficiency.
Yeah,
it's not too hard to do yourself. I do believe in tile on floors. I mean, I think it's a great way to go on floors and shower enclosures. If you can afford it, I really like using a tile instead of a fiberglass enclosure. It just really elevates things a lot. It does. Well, in either case, I find I'm coming back to address joint lines, the tile to either the surround to the tub or the tile to the tub. Those are places where things move around. So at that spot, you use a grout caulking, which is color matched to your grout.
Right.
And it'll mildew a little bit there. It'll crack periodically there or in corners. You need to renew those sometimes. And I don't have, except like a one-piece surround, I guess maybe minimizes it, but those are hard to get around. The most recent unit that I updated, I used it's a faux granite or a faux marble tile. And that's going back to this no more natural.
This is in your shower or tub?
Yeah, it's a tub.
Okay.
Tub surround. Yeah. And in tile and in LVP, the patterns are really good these days. And they look a lot like natural products, and they don't stain or chip or have the issues, and they're not generally as expensive. This was probably $2 a square foot or something like that for the tile.
Ceramic tile.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then bringing it back to countertops, the other option I was considering is butcher block.
I've done that. Yep. I've done it, and I have some that are 20 years old now.
Yeah, right. They last.
They don't look very good.
Yeah. But a lot of people kind of like that sort of worn in look, right? Potentially.
Yeah.
It's an option. Easy to clean.
Well, I did it because IKEA offered, I mean, my whole kitchen, I think I spent $250 on the materials for the whole countertop.
Yeah.
A couple $100.
And that was butcher block?
In butcher block,
yeah.
from IKEA. And that was 3/4 butcher block. I mean, you can go hog wild on like 1.5 or 2-inch thick butcher block, and you can spend way more money than you would on quartz. Or I assume that IKEA and maybe some others have, pretty cost-effective options.
Right.
I wouldn't do it again. I did that at a time where we were definitely really in the bootstrap. I was reusing sinks, getting used stuff, and more power to you if you have the time and the energy to do it. For me, that was a point in life where I had more time than money, and I really needed to keep the costs down. Now the balance having shifted a little bit more, and that this particular property I've had for 21 years now, it's doing great, and the neighborhood has come up. At this point, I would spend the extra money. And the other thing about that is, butcher block's great because you can do it yourself.
Yeah.
Get a guide for your skill saw and clamp it down and follow your cuts, get your jigsaw in the corners, and you can do it yourself. I've made a lot of decisions. In fact, Chris, you and I did. We did paper stone.
Right.
When we flipped that house.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a can of worms. That's a synthetic wood fiber and resin product, which I then had in my house as well.
And it looks like a solid stone or like concrete kind of surface.
Yeah, it's generally a little bit more of a matte finish.
Hmm.
Having lived with it, my issue with it is that it looks best when it has a fresh coat of wax, and
Mm.
it was hard to keep looking good. Other than that, I loved it.
Right.
I thought it was a really environmentally good, good choice. You know, we did a pretty nice job of, undermounting sinks, and I mean, it looked great. And the texture of it is really kind of cool, and I thought the look of it is cool, but you see watermarks on it. That was the biggest issue.
Yeah, it's probably not the best idea for a rental. It requires care and
And heat, I
maintenance.
don't think it did very well
Well,
with
I don't
heat.
think so.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of IKEA,
Mm,
you've used IKEA cabinets and stuff for rentals before, yeah?
a
And
lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, no, IKEA.
Yes.
Yeah.
Short answer. I've got this one property. It was a triplex, and one of the units when I bought it, this was my first rental back in 2004. I chose kind of a glossy white door finish, which has been great, but it's an MDF door, and while the coating is good, it can't deal with water sitting on it. So that particular finish, I don't think I would do again. And not having done I guess it's been 5 or 6 years since I've done an IKEA kitchen. I would have an eye towards really water resistant in the door and drawer fronts is my only hesitation and my mission if I was to go back. And the last one I used actually, it was a um, square edge door, and it had kind of a plastic facing on it and the edge banding, and it's held up well so far. So that might be one.
Mhm.
Very simple, smooth, easy to clean. And my sense was that the finish itself was actually a water impervious product. So then the little joints are the only thing you have to worry about. And so far it's
But it's interesting that you mentioned the doors and the drawer fronts and being concerned about those. Like it seems to me like you'd have more water related issues like on the inside of a cabinet or the inside of a drawer or so it
well,
can face.
I mean, inside the cabinet, I haven't had too many problems with inside the cabinet except where there are leaks under sinks.
Um,
Um, and then, people putting wet things in drawers, a lot does come down to how people live with stuff. So if people putting wet dishes in their drawers, then that could be an
right.
issue.
Yeah.
IKEA actually, not so much with IKEA because the drawers at least are actually a metal,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
a metal shell.
Oh,
The shelves aren't but this phenomenon that I'm talking about with the doors and drawer fronts, it's like if somebody's kind of messy and that like water's dripping down over from the sink,
oh yeah.
even like wet hands on the drawer, that type of thing, over and over and over again, that's
Mm.
where it comes into play.
Okay.
So, but IKEA cabinets are not made out of high-end materials, so the boxes are particle board. But if you put them together carefully and ideally keep them clean, they will. I think I probably am getting to that point after 20 years where I will need to replace that kitchen with the next time.
That's pretty good though. 20 years,
Yeah. And
especially for an IKEA price. Is
yeah, I mean, it probably cost me, it's not a big kitchen, but it's reasonable. I mean, at that time, 20 years ago, it was probably $2,000 to $3,000
yeah.
for all the materials. And I did all the labor,
Hmm.
but, and there are a lot of smart things about the way they do it.
You have
So
to put it together with the one Allen wrench that they give you and the instruction.
follow the dude, the pictures, do what the dude in the paper does. If you carefully,
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Nice.
um,
Okay.
all right. Well, let's see. We've talked about floors and walls and countertops and tiles. And another option for bathrooms is another sheet product. Vinyl that has gotten better as well. So, if you need budget, vinyl is a good way to go. Or if you want, you can go with something like marmoleum, which is fairly expensive, but it's a single sheet and does a really nice job. I'm always really careful with
For a bathroom floor.
bathroom or kitchen, but bathroom
Yeah.
floor.
Okay.
And you can cove it up this is something I did in a commercial bathroom where a restaurant and a couple offices share space. I had them wrap the material up the wall, and so that if it got wet in there, it was all really easy to clean up. I mean,
Right.
you could extend the whole thing to, if you're really remodeling or building new, you could extend to putting floor drains in and that type of thing. But
Right.
that's kind of extreme.
Yeah. Would you recommend that over the luxury vinyl planks?
No, I think cost effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
and
one
those
thing I
those will
would,
hold up in bathrooms fine, right? The LVP and
I
LVT.
think very well.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, One thing I would, and it's some extra effort, but doing a really good job of sealing the joints at the floor to the wall. So that could mean a little bit of sealant under the ends of each of the boards and behind the baseboard. So if water gets out there, it doesn't get in and under. That's the weakness. That the strength, the durability of this product, even in the face of water, it is kind of moot if you get a bunch of water under it. And
Right.
you can look back in one of our previous episodes about when I had flooding. I had a pipe burst,
Right.
and I had to take a bunch of flooring up because water got under there. It's extra energy, and if you don't do it everywhere in a bathroom, the one place I definitely advocate doing it is right at the corner of the tub, at the two corners of the tub where it meets the wall, because people don't get the curtains pulled all the way,
Yeah.
and water dribbles down. I've used the little stick-on bevel thing,
Mm.
between the tile and the tub, and that helps too. But it's clunky.
Yeah.
It doesn't look very good, and eventually somebody knocks them off, and then there's adhesive on the things, and so if people are messy about that and water dribbles down the edge of the tub, if you have done a good job of sealing at that corner between the tub and the floor and the wall, then you don't get rot in that corner,
Yep.
in that spot, which is a common problem.
Yeah. You see that in a lot of places for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, I don't know, Chris, maybe we ought to call it there for the moment. Maybe, who knows? Maybe people will give us some ideas and we'll come back and talk about this again, or we'll have some new ideas. But
That'd be great. Yep.
let us know what you think. We'd love your comments, and please subscribe to the channel so that you can come back and see us again when we put something new out. You'll get notified, and share with anybody that you think might be interested. So
All right. Thanks, everyone.
thanks for watching.